And rather reluctantly, Kaufman said that it was, well, in the end it was Derrida, who decided what scenes were in and what scenes were out. And I said, well, were there any things that you wanted in and that he wanted out, and that eventually did not appear in the film that you would like to have seen in the film? Can you give me an example of one of these scenes? And the example that she gave was Derrida signing the contract for the film. So they filmed him signing the contract of the film, and he did not want that included in the film, and they really wanted that in the film. As you can imagine, they would want that. Now, why didn't they want, so I put this out as a question, why didn't Derrida want this scene to be included? I put that out as a question. I have my own view on that. It's simple, I think, in the end. So that's one question. Second is, whenever Derrida is interviewed or is filmed in front of the camera, there's a certain disowning. There's a gesture of disowning what he then says. It's under the name of improvisation, but he disowns what he says because the feeling that he gets when he's filmed with a microphone, or when he's filmed with a camera or recorded by a microphone, the feeling that he gets is that his words are not his own. So that's a disowning. He always apologizes for his improvisations. It's always an apologia. It's issued as an apologia for the fact that it's an improvisation. That's the second thing. The third thing is, I want to ask a question, again with respect to the camera, but also technology in general. Can technology, or can the machine be performative? Now, classically, according to speech act theory, a machine cannot be performative because you need a person. You need the person there. It requires presence. It presupposes presence performatively. So it would seem that a machine cannot be performative. A camera or some kind of computer could not be performative. So the task would then be to think. It would be impossible for a machine to be performative. Well, that's precisely what would mean that impossibility would, for Derrida, mean that it's the only thing to think. Then to try and think it's impossibility. So you have to think the machine in relation to performativity, some kind of monstrousness, some kind of monster would be produced there. So that would be a question: can the machine be performative? If not, why not?
But I think the issue of the contract is quite interesting because all of those things, I think, and much of that figures on this issue of shame to some extent. That is, I might say something that would be an embarrass, something would be an embarrassment or an obstruction. And I'm sure that has a lot to do with his formation, but he's very wary, of making a misstep. As it were, as a mistake, right? And that one has to almost find a way of effacing that before one makes it, that misstep.
But what is he? He derives the authority to not include that scene precisely from the contract.
Right.
That contract will say, "I have the final say in," and he signs it, and that's the authority. But he doesn't want that to be seen in the film. Why not? Because it would be countersigning the film. It would be It would be seen to be a counter.
He didn't like the film. He told me he didn't like it. He saw it twice and didn't like it.
I'm sure he's told others that he likes it.
Well, maybe, but anyway. But
I'm sure he has.
No, I don't know. But
Nobody likes it.
Except for Derek.
And I think the idea of signing it seems to suggest that he had the authority and that the film wouldn't really be very realistic, you might say, and not have very verisimilitude if he got to go in there.
No, I think it would be the other way around. I think it would be the other way around. If the film showed him signing the contract, it would aggregate to the film an authority it doesn't have.
Well, probably both.
It would aggregate to the filmmakers an authorial voice that they don't have.
Well, I think there's more than one way you can read that. Well, we've talked a little bit about the apology. I don't know about the machine in improvisation because, I'm into music, so, pianos and saxophones and things like that are instruments. They improvise, and you need machinery to improvise with. You need tools to improvise with, whether you're a caveman or a jazz player.
Did you just say that they improvise?
What?
Did you just say that the instruments?
Well, they're part of you. They become an extension of you. Yes, and I think all the media become an extension of you. I've made video art with an artist, and it's very interesting what happens in the studio. It becomes this extension of your body. You're working all these machines and developing this stuff, and it comes out kind of like out of the unconscious. You don't know. You know what I mean? It is an improvisatory free play with the media technology.
But if you're reducing the instrument to a prosthetic, to an extension of you, then it's not itself performative.
Well,
What about an archive as a type of machine, which Derrida tells us precisely doesn't simply conserve, but more radically invents, and that species of invention presumably can't be limited to any single kind of individual. In fact, there's something about the archive which exceeds and supplements in a radical way.
It keeps it secret.
Yeah, but it's performative in the sense that it's not merely conservative, let's say. So an archive would be a machine that performs.
Another thing I would say about that, to go back to allergies of reading, is in that whole, towards the end of the essay on excuses, the man's worked himself up to a point in which the text, the relationship, the concept of performative in the text is producing meaning by itself. And the text is described precisely as a machine, and it's a machine towards death because it's doing something independent of the human author, right? So in that sense, there is performativity and performance going on in the machine, and it's precisely only a machine that could be performative.
Yeah, and in the requirement of repetition, there is something machine-like. That all texts being, or any thing being iterable, there's a sense of its being machine-like in that repetition.
I guess that was why he needed the archive.
Yeah.
Anybody else wants to chip in? Raise your hand. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. You go first.
Two things which I think are connected to the not wanting to be filmed and improvisation.
He did want to be filmed.
Or his reluctance to, what you're saying is that he always apologizes before he has these so-called improvisation.
Yeah, you read all the interviews, they all begin by saying, well, okay, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to improvise.
Yeah, I totally know. I know what you mean. And I don't doubt that there may well be elements of shame going on there, but the readings, when I read those things, and when he does like the echographies, and when I hear him do it when I'm there, it's more about the fact that he can't be himself now because of a certain surveillance, that he's already under watch, and he apologizes that he can't just be himself because there's an observer, like there's some sort of thing that's element that's sort of destroying. And it would go to this thing of improvisation, and he very rarely talks about improvisation. He mentions it once in Truth in Painting. It shows up really quickly in Force of Law, but it's never a comfortable concept, and it's more like iterability calls into question the very idea of improvisation, that there is no improvisation, there is no free play.
Yeah.
No matter what the jazz player's doing, as creative as it is, it has to follow some sort of grammar.
Yeah.
It would have to have, this problem with the record. And I would see those two things together going on with his apologies that now he's surveyed, or the improvisation that can never actually be.
It's quite radical, his saying that there's no such thing as improvisation. I can't remember where he says it now, but he says that as soon as you open your mouth, you're repeating histories, you're calling on others, you're appealing to the proper names.